remember that night like it was stitched into my skin, a memory that keeps me awake during drives through the mountains even now. We'd been heading back from a late dinner in town, the kind of place that seemed lively when the sun sets, but dead and hollow after dark. The road we took was narrow, winding through steep ridges and valleys, the kind that feel like they've been forgotten by everyone except the trees. That night, a dense fog started creeping down from the peaks, moving like water through the hollows, thick enough that our headlights barely made a dent in it. At first we laughed nervously, trying to cut through the sudden quiet, telling jokes about mountain spirits and ghosts in the fog, but the laughter felt hollow even to us. It was as if the fog carried an echo of every sound, every creak of the suspension, every nervous breath, amplifying it back into the car. The road curved sharply ahead, the blacktop slick from a recent rain, the kind of rain that leaves an oily sheen reflecting the misty light. And then I saw it, at the edge of the road, just standing there, a figure that shouldn't have been there. My chest tightened immediately. I don't remember the moment my hands gripped the wheel harder, only that time seemed to slow. The figure didn't move, didn't breathe in any way I could see. It just stood there, its posture wrong, rigid, unnervingly still. The fog twisted around it like the mist itself was trying to hide it, and yet it was somehow more visible than anything else in the haze. My friends laughed, nervously at first, trying to convince themselves and me that it was a hitchhiker, someone playing a prank. But I couldn't look away. There was something about the way it was positioned, almost deliberate, almost waiting. The radio crackled suddenly, a long burst of static that cut through the quiet like a scream in a tunnel. Then it went dead. The soft hum of the engine and the erratic breath of my friends were all that remained. I could hear the tires on the wet asphalt, each rotation marking the passing seconds, but it didn't feel like time was moving forward. It felt as if the mountain had stretched itself around us, holding us in that exact moment. The trees along the road seemed to lean inward, their gnarled branches stretching out like fingers, casting shadows that pooled over the asphalt and mingled with the fog. I swear I could hear whispers, soft and indistinct, curling around the edges of my mind, words I couldn't make out, voices speaking in a language older than anything I knew, carried on the wind that didn't touch the car. We slowed, trying to see if the figure would move, and that's when panic began to gnaw at me. It didn't flinch. Its head didn't turn. It didn't even seem to breathe, and yet, the longer we stared, the heavier the air became. My chest ached from the tightness, and my fingers left impressions on the steering wheel from gripping it so hard. My friends started murmuring, but their voices felt far away, as though coming from behind a thick glass. I could feel their tension, hear it in their breathing, but I couldn't bring myself to tell them what I was really feeling, that something about this figure wasn't just unnatural. It was malevolent in a way that didn't need to act to harm us. I thought about turning the car around, going back the way we came, but the road behind was swallowed in fog too. It was like the mountain had shifted while we weren't looking, trapping us in a loop where every curve led back to the same stretch of road. My heart was hammering in my chest, each beat loud in the quiet, and then I noticed a subtle change. The shadows around the figure seemed to ripple, moving with a slow, unnatural rhythm. It wasn't walking toward us, but the air around it seemed to pulse, like the fog itself was breathing with its presence. I wanted to scream, to open the doors and run, but my legs were frozen, trapped beneath me, and my hands gripped the wheel like it could somehow anchor me to sanity. The whispers became louder then, curling inside the car. My friends froze too, staring at me, eyes wide, waiting for someone to do something. I realized we weren't hearing words anymore. We were hearing memories. Snippets of lives, fear, pain, the soft thump of hearts. And then I thought I could make out a phrase, the same one over and over, almost chant-like. Leave. 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 I swallowed hard, fighting the panic, trying to convince myself that it was the wind, the branches scraping against the car, the fog pressing against every inch of metal. But the chill at the nape of my neck told me otherwise, prickling my skin as if something invisible was brushing against me, lingering in a way that no human could. We tried to inch past slowly, headlights cutting feeble paths through the gray, and then as suddenly as it appeared, the figure vanished. No mist, no movement, just gone. But it left something behind, a cold weight in the car, a lingering presence that made my stomach twist. I could feel its gaze, still burning into the back of my neck, and I realized that whatever had been standing there hadn't needed to move to affect us. The fog seemed heavier in its absence, the shadows denser, pressing closer than before. My friends whispered that maybe it had run off into the trees, but I knew better. I had felt the air shift when it disappeared, like the mountain itself had exhaled. And I understood that it hadn't left. It had simply chosen not to reveal itself further. The rest of the drive was a blur of tight turns, brake lights reflecting in mirrors and the constant, creeping sensation that we were not alone. Every tree seemed alive, every rustle in the underbrush a threat. Even when we reached the last stretch of road that led back to more populated areas, I couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were following us, peering through the fog that clung stubbornly to the mountainsides. I stopped at a diner once we got into town, needing light, warmth, and something ordinary to anchor my mind. But even in the fluorescent glow, I could feel that same weight, that same sense of being watched, as though the fog had attached itself to me, carrying something with it. I haven't taken that road at night since. During the day it feels ordinary, just another winding mountain road, sun-dappled and quiet, but I know what it hides. I've avoided late drives alone, avoided back roads, avoided the mountains after dark whenever possible. And yet sometimes, when the fog rolls in elsewhere, even miles from that road, I can swear I hear it again. Soft whispers riding the wind, a figure at the edge of my vision, and the cold press of something lingering just behind me. It's a memory that refuses to fade, one that grips tighter with every retelling. That night didn't end with screams or crashes. It ended with a look, a presence, and the quiet understanding that some things in the mountains are patient, and some things are better left unseen. Even now, I can't hear the wind through the trees without feeling that weight return. The fog is never just fog anymore. Every shadow, every bend in the road carries the memory of that night. The mountain pass waits quietly for travelers, and I know deep down, it waits for me too. I've driven many roads since, but that one, the one wrapped in fog, lined with watching trees and silent figures, remains untouchable. Every time I think about it, I feel the shiver along my spine, the whispered warning in the wind, and I know that some roads don't forgive curiosity. Some roads are meant to be remembered, not traveled. Even recounting this now, I feel the chill return. It's not fear in the usual sense. Fear is fleeting, but a deep, persistent unease, the kind that sits heavy in your chest and tightens around your throat. That night wasn't just a story. It was an encounter, a brush with something vast and patient. And though I tell it now in the safety of light and warmth, I can't escape the memory of those eyes, or the fog, or the quiet. Insistent whispers that seemed to know exactly what I feared before I even did. The road hasn't changed, but I have. I avoid late drives, especially alone. I warn friends if they insist on taking those back roads, and I never forget the lesson the mountain taught me. Some places are alive in ways we cannot see, and sometimes the presence of something watching is more terrifying than anything that moves. The memory lingers, always. The fog, the figure, the weight of the unseen, they haunt every drive, every whispering wind, every shadow along a lonely mountain road. And I know, with certainty, that the mountain hasn't forgotten me either. It was nearly midnight when we decided to pull off the highway, the kind of impulse you make when the headlights catch something unusual in the dark. The road we were traveling was narrow and winding, the forest pressing in from both sides, and we'd been driving for hours, the hum of the engine and the occasional crackle of the radio, our only companions. That's when we saw it, a gas station tucked into a bend, its silhouette half hidden by shadows and overgrown weeds. From the road it looked abandoned, the paint peeling from years of neglect, the windows grimy and streaked. But one flickering light above the doorway suggested someone, or something, was there. We hesitated at first. The car's tires crunched over gravel as we slowed, and I remember noticing the stillness around us. No wind, no animals, nothing but the occasional rustle of dead leaves. It felt like the forest itself was holding its breath. "Maybe it's just a 24-hour station," my friend joked, though I could hear the nervous edge in his voice. I nodded, trying to convince myself that there was nothing strange about a lonely gas station in the middle of nowhere. But the moment we stepped inside, the air changed. It smelled of damp wood and mildew, the kind of smell that settles into your lungs and won't leave. Dust covered the shelves, thick enough that every footstep we took raised faint clouds that glittered in the dim light. Behind the counter stood a man. He didn't move at first, just watched us with eyes that were too dark, too hollow, the kind of eyes that seemed to absorb light instead of reflecting it. He didn't speak. There was a stillness about him that felt deliberate, a weight in the silence that pressed against my chest. I reached for my wallet, intending to pay for some water, and his hand shot out, stopping me before I could even touch the counter. His fingers were cold, the kind of cold that doesn't belong to the world outside. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered, voice low and raspy, but almost conversational, as if stating a fact rather than a threat. My stomach flipped. I tried to laugh it off, but the sound caught in my throat. I looked around, noticing things I hadn't before. The floorboards creaked under our weight, but not just under our footsteps. I could swear I heard additional creaks coming from empty corners, or maybe from beneath the floor, as though someone or something was moving unseen. The shelves were stocked with items that had clearly been there for decades, but the shadows along the walls didn't behave like normal shadows. They shifted and pooled in ways that didn't make sense, like smoke that had remembered a shape and was trying to cling to it. I could feel my pulse in my ears, loud and erratic, and my hands started trembling. My friends whispered among themselves, voices low, unsure, as though speaking too loudly might draw attention. I noticed the way the man's gaze followed us, not with eyes exactly, but with a presence. It was like he was aware of every thought flickering through my head, every hesitation, every fear. I wanted to step back to leave, but my legs felt rooted to the floor. The light above us flickered more violently, throwing erratic shadows across the walls, and I felt a sudden chill crawling up my spine, as if icy fingers were tracing along my vertebrae. I turned to say something to my friends, to insist we leave immediately, and caught movement in the corner of my eye. Shadows elongated, folding over themselves, forming shapes that shouldn't exist in a place like this. One looked vaguely like a hunched figure, another like a cluster of hands pressed against the wall. When I blinked, they were gone, leaving only the dim light and the man behind the counter, whose eyes seemed even darker now, if that was possible. He tilted his head slightly, still whispering the same warning under his breath. "You shouldn't be here." I fumbled for the door, heart hammering, the sound deafening in the stillness. Every step toward it felt like wading through water, heavy and resistant, and I was aware of the smell of damp wood, of dust, of something else, something metallic, acrid, that made my stomach churn. My friends were already halfway out, but I lingered for a moment, unable to tear my eyes from the counter. The man didn't move from his spot, didn't even shift his weight, but I could feel him, like a shadow pressing from within the room, not behind him, not in front, but everywhere. We stumbled into the night, the gravel crunching beneath our feet, the forest suddenly alive with sounds we hadn't noticed before. Branches snapped in the distance, a low rustle of movement, the snapping of twigs under feet that weren't ours. The headlights of the car flickered as we got in, the engine catching with a shudder, and I swear I felt eyes on the back of the car as we pulled onto the road. We didn't look back, couldn't. Even the light from the flickering bulb above the door seemed to linger in the darkness, staining the night with a memory of that presence. As we drove, silence settled over the car again, heavier this time, more pressing. My friends tried to make conversation, to joke, but their words sounded brittle, hollow. I kept looking in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something moving in the fog, or behind the tree line, or even perched along the roadside. But the road stretched on, narrow, twisting, just like it had before, seemingly normal yet different. I could feel the weight of that night pressing down, pressing into my chest, and I knew we had not left anything behind. That gas station, that man, the shadows, they had attached themselves to us in a way that no distance could undo. Even now, when I think about that night, I can feel it. The way the floorboards groaned under unseen weight, the way the light flickered like a heartbeat, irregular and unnerving. The whisper of the man's warning, the coldness of his hand, the impossible shadows twisting along the walls. It's burned into my memory, a mark I carry silently. I avoid that stretch of road whenever possible, warning friends who travel late at night. Some things in Appalachia don't announce themselves with movement or noise. Some things simply exist, waiting for someone foolish or unlucky enough to notice. The worst part is that it wasn't violent, at least not in the way you expect. There were no screams, no attack. It was the sense of being observed, weighed, measured, and found wanting. The air itself seemed alive, watching, waiting. And though we escaped, I have never felt completely safe at night, never fully alone, because I know that whatever it was that haunted that gas station is patient. It knows the dark, it knows the quiet, it knows how to wait. And I know that the next traveler who happens upon that place might not be as lucky. Sometimes, driving late when the fog presses thick along the road, I swear I can hear that whisper again, carried on the wind. Not words exactly, but a sound, low and soft, reminding me that presence doesn't need to move to be terrifying. The image of the man's empty eyes, the shadows stretching along the dusty walls, the chill of his hand on mine, it all returns as vivid as that first moment. That gas station exists outside of time now, outside of memory, lingering in the mountains like a warning. Some roads, some places, are best left unseen, especially when night falls and the mountains hold their secrets tight. Even recounting it now, I feel the pressure behind my eyes, the weight in my chest, the same hollow dread that I felt stepping through the door for the first time. I have told this story only a handful of times, always in whispers, always with a sense of urgency. Do not go looking for this place. Do not take curiosity down that road, because whatever watches there is patient, and it remembers everyone who has walked through its doors. We never stopped anywhere that looked abandoned after dark again. I've become hyper-aware of the signs, the flicker of a light where it shouldn't be, the smell of damp decay, the emptiness behind a counter. And I know that somewhere deep in Appalachia, that gas station remains, holding its breath, waiting for the next person to step inside and notice the way the shadows move just a little too deliberately. I can feel the memory still, in the whisper of trees, in the hum of a car engine at night, in the flicker of a distant street lamp. It is always there and it has never left me. We had been driving all day down a winding back road that nobody seemed to travel anymore. The kind of road that locals warned you about if you asked where it led. The mountains rose steeply on either side, trees leaning together overhead so that the sunlight barely reached the asphalt even in the afternoon, and the air smelled of damp earth and decaying leaves. By the time we found a clearing near a river, the sky was already bruised with the onset of night. It was a perfect place for camping, or so it seemed at first glance, but there was an uneasy hush about the spot, as if the forest itself had been holding its breath. I remember noticing that the river's current sounded too loud in the quiet, sloshing over rocks with a rhythm that felt deliberate, almost like it was measuring us, marking our intrusion. We set up the tents quickly, joking nervously about the eeriness of the place, trying to convince ourselves it was just the isolation talking. But as the sun dipped fully below the ridges and darkness fell, I began to notice subtle shifts. The trees lining the riverbank swayed gently, but there was no wind. The leaves whispered too clearly, forming fragments of words I couldn't understand at first, distant and soft like someone speaking just beyond hearing. I told myself it was the wind, or the river, or maybe my imagination carrying over the anxiety of being so far from town. My friends laughed off the noises, though I could hear the tension under their chuckles. Then the whispers became unmistakable. They weren't wind anymore. They were voices, soft and intimate, calling our names in tones that were urgent yet pleading. I froze, staring at the shadows cast by the moonlight on the river, but they shifted unnaturally, moving in ways that made my stomach twist. Every time I thought I saw something, it would vanish when I tried to look directly, like the forest itself was aware of my gaze. My friends started whispering to me nervously, voices barely audible over the river, suggesting it might be wildlife or the way the branches rustled. But the cadence, the insistence, the human-like quality of the voices told me otherwise. As the night deepened, I noticed subtle movements around our camp. The shadows along the riverbank stretched, condensed, disappeared, and reappeared closer than they should have. I caught the faint outline of something brushing past one of the tents. My friend yelped when the fabric of their tent collapsed inward, though no one had touched it. I ran over to help, heart hammering, but no explanation existed. The tent flapped loosely, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I saw the outline of a hand against the fabric, vanishing when I blinked. My friends tried to maintain their bravado, muttering reassurances, but their voices trembled under the weight of the silence and the unseen. We sat by the fire, trying to convince ourselves it was all our nerves, but the whispers didn't stop. The words became clearer, sometimes angry, sometimes pleading, always just beyond comprehension. They carried a cadence of fear, almost like the forest was warning us, trying to push us away from something. I felt as if the trees themselves leaned inward, closing in on the small circle of light we had made, and I realized the river's current had shifted, carrying a sound too deliberate to be natural. Occasionally, I thought I could hear footsteps circling the campsite, light and careful, pausing whenever I tried to pinpoint them. My pulse raced, and I felt that same icy press of dread crawling up my spine that you feel when you know you're being watched by something patient, something older than the land itself. Hours passed, though time seemed to lose all meaning in that place. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig made me flinch, my ears straining to distinguish natural sound from the whispering voices. I kept my eyes on the tree line, noting the shadows moving with a grace no human could manage. They would appear in the corner of my vision, close enough that I could make out humanoid shapes, then dissolve into the darkness when I tried to look directly. The forest was alive, but alive in a way that didn't belong to any animal or person I knew. The river, too, seemed to change in tone, gurgling and lapping as if responding to the unseen presence, carrying something in its flow that was almost intelligible. Sleep came in fits, fragmented and shallow. I would wake to the whispering in the darkness, to the sensation of something brushing past the tents, something moving without sound or weight. I could feel eyes on us all night, cold, deliberate, holding every thought and motion under inspection. My friends stirred occasionally, murmuring in half-sleep, and I could tell they were aware of the same presence I was, though none of us could explain it without sounding insane. By the time the first light of dawn touched the mountains, I was exhausted, hollow, and uneasy in a way that only the isolation of the forest can breed. We packed quickly, avoiding the tents that had collapsed, ignoring the soft rustling that seemed to follow us as we loaded the car. The forest didn't ease with the daylight. The shadows remained, lingering in corners, in the space between trees, whispering still, though less clearly, as though it was displeased by our departure. I kept glancing over my shoulder while driving down the narrow backroad, seeing shapes that seemed to melt into the distance when I blinked, hearing the faint echo of voices carried by the river that had accompanied us for miles. Even weeks later, I find that every time I walk through a forested area, every time the wind rustles leaves just so, I hear fragments of those whispers. They are never coherent, but they carry the same tone of warning, pleading, and watchfulness. I can feel the memory of that night lingering in my chest, the sensation of shadows moving with intent, the pressure of unseen eyes tracking every movement. I can't explain why the tents collapsed, why the voices were human in tone yet impossible in origin, or why the river carried such an unnatural cadence. But the fear it left behind is indelible. That campsite has become more than a memory. It is a lens through which I view any quiet wilderness. I am cautious now, aware that the isolation we so often romanticize in the mountains can be deceptive. There are places that hold memory, that hold presence, that wait in the dark for travelers to make a mistake. That night taught me that some backroads are not to be trusted, that some rivers are more than they appear, and that some forests remember who has trespassed. I've tried to rationalize it over and over, suggesting it was sleep deprivation, nerves, or even hallucination. But the detail lingers, the shadowy movements, the voices that were too articulate to be wind, the cold, deliberate brush of something against the tents. The memory is sharper than most real experiences I've had since. It doesn't fade, doesn't soften, and it continues to shape how I interact with the forest. Even now, when I hear the river nearby, my muscles tense, my eyes scan for movement, and I feel that same old pressure of being watched. I don't know what we encountered that night, and I'm not sure I want to. Some questions don't have answers, and some experiences leave a mark not in explanation, but in lingering sensation. That night on the river remains with me as a testament to the mountain's quiet power, to the patient attention of a place that isn't empty. It's alive in a way that doesn't need form or voice. Its presence alone is enough to make you doubt what you know about the world, to make you question your own senses and the safety of what seems familiar. The forest along that river is not haunted in the way stories told in town make it out to be. It isn't full of monsters waiting to jump out. Its terror is quieter, more patient. It watches, it waits. It whispers in the wind, in the movement of shadows, in the gurgle of the water. And when you leave, it follows, not in body, but in memory, in sensation, in the subtle, instinctual dread that makes every nighttime sound in the mountains feel deliberate. Even years later, I avoid that road whenever I can. I avoid camping near rivers that wind through isolated forest. But sometimes I can't help it, and I feel it then. The echo of the whispers, the impossible shifting of shadows, the slow, deliberate movement of unseen presence. That night changed the way I perceived the mountains, the rivers, and the quiet spaces in between. It taught me that some places are alive with memory, with watchfulness, and that some warnings are meant not to be ignored. The river whispers still, and in the quiet, I hear it calling, sometimes my name, sometimes just murmuring in tones I cannot translate, but I know what it means. It means, above all, remember. I remember that night as clearly as if it were yesterday, though I've tried not to think about it, tried to push it out of my mind. We were driving through a hollow late at night, the kind of narrow valley road that twists like a serpent through the Appalachian mountains. The trees leaned close over the road, their branches interlocking to form a canopy so dense that the moonlight couldn't touch the asphalt. Everything outside the headlights was swallowed in darkness. It was the sort of night where the forest feels like it's listening, holding its breath while something waits in the shadows. We were joking at first, trying to keep the mood light as we wound our way along the curves. But there was an unease we all felt, quiet and insistent, pressing in from the surrounding woods. That's when I saw the headlights. At first I thought it was another car coming from the opposite direction, nothing unusual except that the hollow is seldom traveled. As we passed, I noticed something off. The vehicle wasn't slowing for the curves, wasn't even moving in a natural way. For a moment it hung there, and then it disappeared entirely, leaving nothing behind. I blinked, thinking it must have taken a side road or vanished in a trick of the terrain. But the hollow had no side roads, no turn-offs, no branching paths. I pointed it out to my friends, but the unease in my chest made my voice tremble, and they could feel it too. Moments later, it appeared again, headlights bright and impossibly close. No matter how far we sped down the twisting road, the lights stayed in the distance, then closer, mirroring our movement in a way that shouldn't have been possible. Every time we stopped, the lights stopped. When we accelerated, they accelerated. I tried to reason it out, telling myself it was another car on a parallel road or a trick of perspective in the hollow, but the rhythm was too deliberate, too precise. I could feel it pressing against the car, the quiet of the hollow not just surrounding us, but weighing down on us, alive and patient. My friends were silent, faces pale in the glow of the dashboard. No one spoke, afraid to break the spell of that unnatural presence. The woods seemed to lean closer with every turn, shadows stretching out to touch the edges of the car. I could hear the tires crunching over gravel and leaves, every squeak magnified in the stillness, every whisper of wind sounding louder than it should. My hands clenched the steering wheel so tight my knuckles ached. The hollow seemed infinite, each bend opening onto another curve, another shadow, another flash of those headlights behind us. We tried to focus on the road ahead, on anything tangible, but the lights persisted. They moved with us like a living thing, patient and relentless, not flickering, not dimming. I remember a moment where I thought if we just slammed on the brakes and waited, maybe it would pass. But the thought was suffocating. Even stopping made the hollow feel alive. The darkness around the car pressing closer, breathing through the trees, crawling along the asphalt. I could feel my pulse hammering in my ears, in my throat, the fear curling around my stomach like a coiled serpent. At some point, I lost track of how long we had been driving. Every turn led to another curve, every straightaway felt impossibly short. The lights never blinked, never wavered. They were there, a mirror to our movements, watching. I could sense my friends' panic, the quiet edge of terror that made them mute. I wanted to speak, to ask what we were seeing, to force it into words, but the weight of the hollow was too oppressive. Speaking felt dangerous, like drawing attention to ourselves. Then, as abruptly as they had appeared, the lights vanished. No flicker, no retreat, no turning away, just gone. The darkness swallowed the road, leaving only the trembling headlights of our car illuminating the asphalt. I remember the silence that followed, thick and nearly unbearable. Our breaths echoed inside the vehicle, each one loud, each one carrying the weight of relief and lingering dread. The trees no longer leaned in, the shadows settled back into their places, but the hollow still felt alive, as if it had noticed our fear and was satisfied, or perhaps irritated by our escape. The rest of the drive felt unreal, our senses heightened, every crackle in the underbrush and every shift in the shadows triggering a memory of those lights. Even reaching the main road didn't ease the tension. The forest felt like it had imprinted itself onto us, a quiet reminder that it was patient and persistent. We spoke little after that, words seeming pointless, inadequate to describe the fear we had experienced. Every turn of that hollow had been precise, deliberate, as if the road itself was guiding us or testing us. Weeks later, I drove through the hollow again, this time in daylight. The road was familiar and unthreatening. The trees still leaned over the curves, but the tension was gone, replaced by a quiet, deceptive normalcy. Yet, even in the brightness of day, I felt the memory of the lights pressing against me. Shadows still seemed to shift at the corners of my vision, and the hollow felt alive, not malevolent but patient, aware and unyielding. It is a place that carries its own sense of time and its own awareness. And every visit leaves a subtle mark on those who pass through. I can't explain what those headlights were, and I've avoided late drives through that hollow ever since. They weren't vehicles in the way we know vehicles, not exactly. They didn't follow the rules of the road, didn't act as living drivers would. They were deliberate, almost sentient, moving with awareness of us, reacting to our decisions, timing every approach and retreat. The memory lingers, an echo that tightens in my chest every time I think of that road. Sometimes, even in my dreams, I am driving through the hollow again. The twists stretch endlessly, the trees pressing down, and the headlights return, following, stopping and starting with my own movements. It is never threatening in a conventional sense. There is no crash, no attack, only the persistent, suffocating sense of being observed, measured, and mirrored. It is that feeling that has haunted me far more than anything I've ever read or imagined. The oppressive, quiet pressure of an environment that watches and waits, patient and deliberate. I don't take that hollow lightly anymore. I warn anyone who asks about it, though most laugh off the warning. But I know better. Some places are patient, some places observe. And in Appalachia, in the shadows of the mountains under the canopy of trees that have seen more than we could ever imagine, some hollows remember the people who pass through. Some follow them for miles, even when they can no longer be seen. Even weeks later, when driving anywhere at night, the memory clings. The hollow doesn't exist just in space. It exists in perception, in instinct, in the gut-deep unease that can't be shaken. The headlights, the curves, the leaning trees, all of it is embedded into my memory like a scar. And I know that if I ever take that road alone, at night, I will feel the hollow's attention, patient and unyielding, pressing against me, testing me once again. It is not a story of monsters or ghouls. It is a story of presence, of place, of something that watches, quiet and deliberate. That night taught me that fear doesn't always arrive with movement or sound. It can be a weight, an awareness, a reflection of your own choices in a landscape that doesn't belong to you. The hollow is patient and it remembers. I have felt it, I cannot unfeel it. And every time I hear the wind rustle through trees in a quiet valley, I feel the hollow there, just beyond sight, just beyond reason, waiting for the next traveler to notice. We had been driving down Route 23 for hours, the storm rolling in from the mountains and turning the sky a bruised gray. Rain began to lash against the windshield, heavy enough to blur the edges of the road, and the trees pressed in so closely that the world outside seemed to vanish. My friends were laughing nervously, trying to keep the mood light, but the tension was palpable. Visibility was poor, and the road wound tighter than I remembered, twisting over ridges and disappearing around sharp curves. That's when we saw it. A cabin, tucked away where the forest thickened, half hidden by the shadows of the towering trees and the sheets of rain. It was old, weathered by years of wind and storms. Yet there was a strange solidity to it, a sense that it had been waiting there for us, unnoticed but present, patient. We pulled up to the small clearing, tires crunching over wet leaves and mud. The door of the cabin hung slightly ajar, creaking gently with each gust of wind. as if inviting us inside. I felt an immediate chill crawl up my spine, the kind that comes from stepping into a space that has held too much and told too little. The rain beat on the roof sounded louder inside, hollow and resonant, each drop a small hammer against the already fragile nerves. When I pushed the door, it groaned as though in protest, and a wave of damp, musty air, mingled with the faint, coppery tang of something metallic, rolled out to meet us. It smelled of old wood, of mold, and of something I couldn't place, something sharp, almost alive in its insistence. Inside, the cabin seemed intact at first glance. The furniture was old but sturdy, chairs and a table worn smooth from years of use. Yet the walls drew my eyes almost immediately. They were scrawled with names, dates, and strange symbols I couldn't make sense of, etched deep into the wood as though by someone who had spent years there, cataloging something I wasn't meant to understand. I traced a finger along one of the carvings, feeling the grooves worn smooth, the edges darkened with age, and it felt like touching someone else's memory, a shadow of lives long gone. The firewood stacked in a corner was dry but untouched. The fireplace was cold, yet despite the stillness, the cabin felt alive, as though it was breathing in the storm outside and exhaling it inside. Night fell quickly, bringing with it an oppressive darkness that the small lantern we'd brought barely penetrated. We settled into the cabin uneasily, the wind rattling the windows with surprising force, though no gale had reached the clearing. That's when I first heard it, the sound of footsteps above us, slow, deliberate, pacing along the attic floor. At first I thought my mind was playing tricks, that the storm had caused the roof to shift, but the pattern was too steady, too controlled. I called up to the ceiling, joking nervously, but no response came. My friends laughed it off as well, suggesting it was just the old cabin settling, wood contracting with humidity, but the sound didn't stop. It circled the attic in a rhythm I could feel through the floorboards, each step a reminder that someone, or something, was moving above us. The shadows began to change then. In the corners of the cabin, dark pools formed, thicker than any shadow should be, as if the absence of light had mass, waiting and patient. I could feel them pressing at the edges of my vision, moving when I wasn't looking directly, retreating when I tried to confront them. I noticed that some of the furniture seemed slightly out of place in the dim light. The chairs angled differently than I remembered. The table shifted by inches, subtle enough that my friends didn't notice, but enough to unnerve me. The air grew heavier, each breath feeling like it had weight, pressing down on my chest, on my shoulders, on the back of my neck. By midnight, the cabin was filled with sounds that no storm could explain. Floorboards groaned beneath the attic, windows rattled even without wind, and faint whispering seemed to drift through the rafters, soft enough that I couldn't understand the words, but insistent, persistent, almost conversational. I stayed close to the lantern, its weak light throwing long shadows that only deepened the sense of being watched. Every creak, every shift of wood, every flicker of light heightened my awareness, making me jump at the faintest noise. My friends attempted to laugh and tell themselves it was just the storm, just an old house, just their imagination, but I knew better. I could feel a presence in the room, patient and observing, pressing from the walls, from the floor, from the ceiling itself. Sleep was impossible. I lay in my sleeping bag, listening to the attic above, the whispers, the occasional brush of what felt like fingers against the walls, and I tried to convince myself it was nothing. But when I closed my eyes, I could feel eyes on the back of my neck, cold, patient, unblinking. The names on the walls seemed to press into me, their carved letters more than symbols, more than words. They were warnings, records, memories that were never meant to leave the cabin. I felt as though I had walked into a place that had existed outside of normal time, a cabin that was aware of its occupants, that cataloged their fear, that waited for them to leave. Morning came reluctantly, the storm easing, light seeping through gaps in the weathered walls, but it brought little comfort. The cabin seemed to sigh with the release of the wind, shadows retreating but leaving traces. Small things shifted again, marks in the dust, impressions in the floor where no one had stepped. We packed quickly, avoiding the spots that had seemed most alive in the darkness. I remember stepping outside and feeling a momentary relief as the rain cooled my face, but that relief was fleeting. The road leading away from the cabin felt different now, like a tunnel, a corridor into unknown spaces rather than a path back to the world. The mountains around us seemed taller, the trees closer, and the forest carried the echo of the cabin with it, pressing into the mind like a memory you cannot shake. Even weeks later, I can feel the cabin in my thoughts. The images of the scrawled walls, the steps in the attic, the shadows pooling in corners, the cold presence watching, it all lingers. Driving past similar wooded stretches, I catch myself imagining the floorboards creaking, the whispers curling in the rafters, the metallic tang of the air pressing into my lungs. I cannot explain what we encountered, cannot rationalize the awareness that seemed to fill the cabin, and I do not want to. Some places in Appalachia exist for reasons we will never understand, and some buildings hold more than their physical form. The cabin on Route 23 is one of those places. I have avoided stopping at abandoned cabins since, wary of the subtle weight of their histories, wary of the traces they leave behind. But when I drive that road, especially during storms or at night, I feel it again. The sense of being observed, recorded, and quietly judged by something that has existed longer than memory itself. The hollowed cabin on Route 23 is not just a structure. It is a presence, patient, persistent, alive in ways that defy explanation. And even now, when I think about the road, the trees, the storm, I can feel its eyes on my back. And the path away from it feels less like a road and more like a journey through its enduring gaze. A tunnel into the unknown that will never truly release me. I remember that night as if it were carved into my memory. Each detail etched in the kind of clarity that comes from fear that refuses to let go. We were driving along a lonely stretch of mountain road, the kind that twists and dips between ridges, the asphalt slick with early autumn rain. The forest pressed in on either side, the trees tall and close, their branches intertwining above to make a tunnel of shadow that blocked out the sky. It was quiet in a way that made every sound outside the car seem amplified. The drip of water from leaves onto the road, the whisper of wind through the treetops, even the tires crunching over scattered gravel. My friends were laughing at first, trying to lighten the mood, but I could feel unease settling over us, the kind that creeps in slowly, wrapping around your chest. That's when we saw it. A beat-up pickup truck, headlights glaring behind us. At first, I thought it was someone just catching up, but as the minutes passed, it stayed exactly behind us, following every turn, every dip, every curve of the road. We tried to accelerate, tried to slow, tried to switch lanes when the road widened, and still, the truck stayed there, silent except for the low, constant growl of its engine. No one passed us when we switched lanes. There were no other vehicles in sight. It was as though it existed solely to follow, to track our movement. Every shadow of the mountains reflected in its glare. I tried to rationalize it at first, maybe a local driving home, maybe a logging truck delayed, but nothing about it fit. The headlights never dimmed, never flickered. The engine's growl didn't fluctuate with speed. The truck matched us perfectly, almost anticipating every move we made. I could feel it in my chest, that oppressive weight of unseen attention pressing down, a presence that wasn't just following. It was aware. My friends began to quiet, their nervous chatter fading into uneasy silence, each of us too aware of the subtle shifting of the trees, the way shadows seemed to lean toward the road, the dark pressing in as though the mountains themselves had leaned in. We finally spotted a deserted pull-off, a small stretch of cracked pavement beside the road, and I slammed on the brakes, hoping the truck would pass us by. We waited, hearts hammering, breath visible in the cool night air. The pickup followed us into the pull-off, and then, in the blink of an eye, it was gone. No skid marks, no tire tracks, nothing. The silence that followed was deafening, heavier than anything I had felt before. The forest seemed to close in around us, the trees swaying faintly in the wind, the mountain shadows deep and patient, as though they had absorbed the presence and kept it with them, waiting for the next traveler to make a mistake. We didn't speak as we got back into the car. The engine's hum sounded foreign after the oppressive quiet, and every small noise, the click of a seatbelt, the turn of a key, felt amplified. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, expecting to see the truck appear again, lights blazing, engine growling, but there was nothing. The road stretched ahead like a tunnel carved from darkness, and every turn seemed longer than it should, the shadows pressing along the edges of the headlights, reminding me of what had just been. My hand shook on the wheel, tight and unrelenting, and the knot of unease in my stomach refused to release. Even after we left that stretch of mountain road, I could feel it. I could feel the truck in the space behind my eyes, the low growl echoing when I closed them, the headlights pressing against the back of my skull in a way that made sleep uneasy. My friends tried to laugh it off later, but the memory haunted them too. The timing, the impossibility, the way it seemed to exist not as a vehicle, but as a presence, part of the woods themselves, patient and watching. Weeks later, driving past similar mountain roads at night, I catch glimpses of it in my mind, the low growl, the glare of the headlights, the way the shadows bend as if aware. It was never just a truck. It was the mountains watching. It was the hollow road aware of travelers, measuring their fear, testing their awareness, recording their movements. That stretch of road is no longer just asphalt. It's a space that remembers, a place where something unseen lingers just beyond vision, patient, unyielding, impossible to outrun. The truck never appeared in daylight, never in traffic, never in a place it could be rationalized. It only existed there, in that narrow, twisting mountain hollow, a reminder that some roads are never truly empty. And even now, when I close my eyes at night, I see it creeping just beyond the next curve, engine growling softly, headlights blazing, waiting for the next traveler to step onto that stretch of road unprepared. I can still feel the weight of its presence, patient, deliberate, the oppressive attention pressing from behind, the knowledge that the woods themselves can follow, can watch, can wait. Some nights I dream of that road, and in the dream, no matter how fast I drive, no matter which turns I take, the headlights are always there, glowing like eyes, engine rumbling with a life of its own, silent and terrible in its patience. That stretch of road, that hollow mountain curve, has never left me. Even when I tell this story, the memory tightens in my chest, the oppressive pressure of unseen attention, the low growl, the headlights in the rearview mirror, reminding me that what we saw wasn't just a vehicle, it was a presence, waiting, observing, part of the mountains themselves, patient and eternal. Some roads are better left alone, some nights are better not traveled, and some trucks should never appear where they shouldn't. I remember pulling off the highway onto the overpass just as twilight was fading, the kind of moment that feels normal until it isn't. We'd been driving for hours through Appalachia, the road winding and narrow, tucked between ridges thick with trees that swallowed the last light of day. I suggested we stretch our legs, get some air before the next stretch of road, and my friends agreed, though I could see their tired smiles didn't quite reach their eyes. The fog had begun to settle low into the valley below, curling like smoke, and the lights of the distant town barely glimmered through the gray haze. At first it was beautiful, quiet in the way only high places can be when you're alone with the mountains. But then I noticed them, pairs of eyes, dozens of them, reflecting faintly in the mist at the edge of the tree line. I froze, my stomach tightening, and my friends followed my gaze. At first we thought it might be lanterns from some cabin or maybe deer reflecting back the fading sunlight. I stepped closer to the railing, squinting, and the eyes blinked, once together, unnaturally synchronized. My heart thumped, a steady, insistent warning that something was wrong. I called out, voice barely carrying across the fog, and the eyes blinked again, as if acknowledging me, as if aware. The fog shifted then, thicker now, creeping along the overpass, curling at our ankles like a living thing. I could feel the air change, dense, heavy, like breathing it carried weight, pressure that made my chest tighten. My friends laughed nervously, trying to rationalize it. "It's just deer," one said, but the motion didn't match, not at all. The eyes didn't move naturally, didn't scatter. They stayed, locked on us with a patience that was almost conscious. The forest beyond the tree line felt alive in a way I'd never experienced. The shadows coiling and stretching between the trunks, the fog twisting and curling around invisible shapes. Every instinct in me screamed to leave, but curiosity and the stubborn confidence of youth kept my feet planted. The more I stared, the more I noticed subtle movements, the way branches bent slightly, too deliberate, the way the mist seemed to swirl around points in the trees as if marking them. The overpass felt exposed, suddenly smaller, like the fog in the eyes and the unseen weight of the forest were pressing in on us from all sides. I could hear the wind rustling the leaves far below, though it carried no real sound, just a faint susurration that reminded me of whispered speech. Each blink of those eyes tightened the knot in my chest, and I felt the gaze of something vast and patient weighing down on us. I tried to laugh it off, to talk to my friends, but the words stuck in my throat. Their own silence confirmed my fear. Whatever it was, they felt it too. The fog shifted again, rolling closer, and I swear I felt it reach, like it wanted us to notice, wanted to be seen. A twig snapped behind us, sharp, sudden, and my pulse jumped into my throat. I turned quickly, expecting someone, or something, to be there, but nothing appeared in the dim light. The sound came again, louder this time, closer, and I realized it wasn't just one snap. Something large was moving through the woods below, deliberate and slow, tracking us. I didn't see it, but I could hear the branches yielding under its weight, the subtle shifts of leaves, the brush of something too big to be an animal passing through the dense undergrowth. The eyes never left us, and now I understood. They weren't just watching, they were marking, alerting, communicating with whatever was out there. We didn't speak, didn't move quickly. The fog pressed against our legs, curling around shoes and ankles, thickening with each moment we lingered. The overpass suddenly felt high and narrow, the guardrails flimsy, and the distance to the valley below uncomfortably real. My friends whispered about the impossibility of what we were seeing, joking nervously about stories of the hollow-eyed watchers from the county, but their voices were hollow, unsure. I could feel the forest beyond the fog holding its breath, and I knew then that we had stumbled into a space that wasn't meant for outsiders. The fog continued to swirl, shifting almost toward us, and the eyes blinked again, synchronized, deliberate. It felt like a warning, and I could feel a primal panic rising, slow and cold. My hands gripped the railing, knuckles white, and I could feel the slick metal under my palms vibrating faintly with tension, almost resonating with the attention from the woods. My ears picked up every minute sound, the wind moving through the branches, the faint scuttle of some creature in the brush, the subtle thud of a branch snapping under weight we couldn't see. Every noise made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. Finally, we moved, stepping back toward the car slowly, not wanting to provoke anything that might be watching. I kept glancing over the edge of the overpass, and the eyes followed, blinking in unison, unbroken. The forest seemed to ripple, fog curling around unseen shapes, and I had the distinct impression that we were being tracked, studied, cataloged, as if we were trespassers in a domain older and more aware than we could comprehend. My friends were pale, shoulders tight, walking in silence, and I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in the quiet. When we finally drove away, the overpass behind us disappeared into fog and shadow, but the sense of observation did not. Every branch that snapped in the distance, every rustle of leaves on side roads, every flicker of movement at the edge of the trees reminded me of those eyes, blinking in unison, patient, aware. I could still feel the weight of unseen attention pressing down, the subtle, patient scrutiny of a place that had noticed us. The valley wasn't empty. Not by any measure. It was full of watchers, some unseen, some only hinted at by the glimmer of reflected light in the fog. Even now, I avoid stopping at overlooks, avoid foggy valleys, avoid stretches of road that feel too quiet or empty. The memory of those eyes follows me, haunting peripheral vision, a ghostly vigilance embedded into my memory. I know that the forest holds more than trees and soil. It holds observation, patience, and something that remembers every moment we trespass. Sometimes I think I can feel it when I drive at night. The fog curling in my mind, eyes blinking, reflecting some unbroken awareness that I will never fully understand. That overpass was more than a stopping point. It was a threshold, a place where the world beyond our understanding brushed against the mundane. We left quickly, but the fog, the eyes, the unseen weight of the valley stayed with us, pressing into our awareness in a way that no rational explanation can erase. Even now, years later, I can picture them, rows upon rows of eyes glinting in fog, blinking in unison, patient, unblinking, aware. The memory lingers, tight and cold, and I know that if I return to that hollowed valley, the watchers will still be there, waiting. Some places are patient, some places remember, and that overpass, shrouded in fog and shadow, watching from the tree line, taught me that the mountains hold more than trees. They hold attention, deliberate and unyielding, and some of it is meant to be noticed. remember the night we took that back road as if it's carved into my memory. Every detail sharper for the fear that followed. We were driving late, headlights cutting weak lines through the darkness, the GPS showing only a blank signal where the road should have continued. The air had that heavy, damp smell that hangs over Appalachian forests after rain, the kind that seeps into your clothes and hair and seems to thicken the shadows. At first, it felt like any other quiet road, the rhythmic thrum of the engine beneath us and the occasional rustle of leaves in the trees. But as we drove deeper, the world outside began to fade. The forest pressing in closer with each mile, the trees forming walls so dense that even the headlights didn't penetrate beyond a few feet. The road itself began to narrow, subtly at first until it felt unnaturally tight, hemmed in by thick roots and undergrowth that shouldn't have been encroaching on asphalt. I kept glancing at the GPS, hoping it would reconnect, but it remained dead, the little signal icon blinking like a warning. And then we reached a bend and the road ended. Not gradually, not as a curve or descent, but simply vanished. There was no continuation, no sign, just darkness dropping away into what I can only describe as nothingness. I leaned forward, trying to see the bottom, the edge, anything. But the headlights only caught a faint mist at the edge before it dissolved into pure black. I tried to backtrack, to drive the car the way we had come, but the road behind us had disappeared as well. In its place was thick mud and tangled roots, as if the forest itself had swallowed the asphalt whole. Panic rose in my chest, tight and suffocating. I turned the key to start the engine, but nothing happened, just a faint click and the echo of silence. Then the engine sputtered weakly, coughing as though it were alive and struggling against some unseen force. The forest was completely still around us, yet the air was charged, heavy with anticipation, as though the trees themselves were leaning closer, watching, waiting. My friends whispered, voices shaky and breathless, trying to make sense of what we were seeing. I could feel it too, the oppressive silence, the weight of a place that existed outside of time and reason. Minutes or maybe hours passed, though time felt wrong there. Every instinct in me screamed to leave, to escape, but the car refused to start reliably, only coughing and sputtering when I tried again. The forest seemed alive, the shadows in the trees bending and stretching toward us. Occasionally, I thought I saw movement just beyond the edge of the headlights, a flicker of shape that could have been a branch, could have been something else entirely. My friends tried to joke nervously, suggesting it was fog or our imagination, but the weight of the silence pressed down on us in a way that made laughter impossible. Eventually, the engine caught fully, shuddered, and we moved forward, testing the space where the road should have continued. Each movement was cautious, hesitant, because the memory of that emptiness, the nothingness at the bend, was still vivid, clawing at the edges of my mind. When the asphalt returned beneath the tires, it felt like stepping into another world, as if the forest had released us after deciding we had seen enough. But even as the road straightened and the familiar curves returned, the memory of the silence remained, embedding itself in my senses. The air seemed heavier, the shadows longer, the trees pressing closer, even in places we knew were safe. I can still feel it sometimes, driving at night on other back roads, that oppressive hush that can descend without warning, the kind of silence that isn't absence. It's waiting, patient, aware. It presses against your ears, your chest, your sense of certainty, and reminds you that some paths exist only for those willing to trespass into spaces not meant for outsiders. The road on that night, the one that ended in nothing, the forest that seemed to bend and shift as if alive, is embedded into my memory as a warning. Some curiosity has a cost, and some roads, no matter how mundane they appear, have their own intent. Even now, I hesitate when a GPS drops signal in the mountains, when the road narrows unnaturally, when the forest leans in too close. I feel that memory pressing, thick and patient, the hush waiting to return. It is more than the absence of sound. It is the presence of attention, deliberate and unseen, reminding you that the world has corners we are not meant to explore. That night, the road vanished, the car faltered, and the forest watched. And though the asphalt returned, and we escaped with our lives, the weight of that silence, the expectation in the dark, the oppressive awareness that followed us, it never left. I do not take unknown roads lightly anymore. Even now, A back road in Appalachia feels alive, its silence telling stories, its shadows moving with a purpose I cannot explain. Some roads are ordinary until they are not. Some forests are patient, waiting for the next traveler to step too far, to notice what they should not, to feel the hush descend. That road, the one that ended in silence, taught me that curiosity has limits, and some paths are meant only to trap the unwary in memory and dread, in the quiet awareness that some places do not forgive, even driving past it in daylight. The stretch of route, the trees, the bends, it still holds me in memory. I can feel it in the sway of branches, the stretch of shadows, the momentary hush that falls over a quiet road. The forest remembers, and sometimes I think it waits, patient and deliberate, for the next person to drive too far, to notice too much, to feel the hush that exists between the trees, thick as the fog, heavy as the night itself. I remember that night with a clarity that still makes my chest tighten. The kind of memory you can't shake because it pressed against every sense at once. We were driving along a back road late in the evening, the sky heavy and low, clouds almost brushing the treetops that leaned close on either side. The mountains around us were dark, silhouettes cut against the fading light, and the only sound was the hum of the engine and the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. We were joking, trying to keep ourselves alert on the long drive, but there was a tension, a subtle pull of unease I couldn't explain. That's when we saw it, an old railroad crossing, abandoned, the warning lights flickering intermittently like a heartbeat, stubborn and irregular. The tracks themselves were barely visible under years of decay, rusted and overgrown, stretching straight into darkness where the forest had claimed them. The air shifted as we approached. It felt heavier, colder, carrying a metallic tang that stung my nostrils and made my mouth dry. Somewhere in the distance, a whistle echoed, long, low, haunting, but no trains were scheduled. No schedules existed for this abandoned stretch. The sound carried far in the night, bouncing off the hills and returning in strange, warped echoes that made it impossible to tell distance or direction. I slowed the car instinctively, the tires crunching on gravel as the engine's hum felt unnaturally loud in the oppressive quiet. That's when I saw it, a shadow moving along the tracks, far too long and too thin to be human. It slithered almost, stretching across the rails, bending in impossible ways with each movement. My heart slammed in my chest. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, thinking maybe it was a trick of light, a distortion caused by the flickering signals. But the shadow remained, its presence undeniable, gliding along the rails with deliberate, impossible grace. Every instinct screamed to leave, to accelerate and put miles between us and the tracks. But something held me there, frozen and captivated by the unnatural shape. My friends whispered, voices shaky, suggesting it was a tree branch, maybe an animal, anything rational, but I knew it wasn't. Its movement was deliberate, conscious, deliberate in a way that no animal, no branch could mimic. When we slowed further, almost to a stop, the shadow vanished. One moment it stretched across the tracks, impossibly long, and the next it was gone, leaving behind only the faintest echo of footsteps clanging across metal. The sound lingered, reverberating through the clearing, yet we could see no source, nothing to have made it. My hands gripped the steering wheel tight enough to leave impressions in my palms, and my chest felt heavy, almost suffocated by the silence that followed. The metallic taste in the air thickened, pressing on my tongue, my throat, and I could feel a coldness settle deep in my bones. We tried to start moving again, urging the car forward, tires crunching over gravel. But the tracks seemed to linger in our minds, stretching the road behind us into a memory of the crossing that refused to leave. The whistle sounded again, closer this time, echoing in perfect rhythm with the flickering lights, though still no train existed, and no human could have produced it. The forest around the crossing seemed to lean in, trees bending subtly, branches scraping the car like fingers brushing our skin. Every shadow seemed to twitch with life, every rustle of leaves timed with the metallic echo of distant footsteps. Panic finally took hold when we realized we had slowed too long. I slammed the gas, pushing the car forward, and the tracks fell behind us, swallowed by darkness and forest. The flickering lights of the crossing receded into the distance, yet the echo of that whistle clung to my ears, bending and twisting in ways I couldn't place. My friends were silent, eyes wide, gripping the door handles as though the forest itself could reach through the windows. Every instinct screamed that we had been observed, marked, even if we didn't know why. Even after the crossing disappeared behind us, the memory remained palpable. Driving past other abandoned stretches, I catch glimpses of rails glinting faintly in the moonlight. And I feel the same oppressive weight, the same metallic tang in the air, the same echo of impossible footsteps that seem to follow no logical path. Sleep has never been the same since. I dream of the tracks stretching endlessly, the shadow moving impossibly long, the whistle sounding at a place and time that shouldn't exist. The experience taught me that some roads, some crossings exist in a space between reality and memory, places where attention itself lingers, watching, patient. The abandoned railroad is more than rusted steel and decaying ties. It is a corridor for something older, something patient, something aware of those who wander too close. The tracks remember, the whistle echoes, and the shadow waits, always just beyond sight. Years later, I still avoid the old rail lines at night. Even in daylight, there is a weight to those places, a quiet that presses too close, that suggests observation, that reminds me the Appalachian woods have their own consciousness, their own patience, their own memory. And every time I hear a whistle carried by wind through the ridges, I remember that crossing, the shadow that shouldn't have been, the metallic taste in the air, and I feel the silent observation returning, patient and deliberate, marking every step I take near abandoned tracks. Some places exist only to be remembered, and some crossings only to be feared. The railroad is one of them, patient, eternal, and entirely awake. The shadow, the whistle, the echo of footsteps across metal, they haunt me still. A reminder that in the Appalachians, the woods, the fog, and the tracks themselves may watch, wait, and remember far longer than anyone passing through could ever hope to. I remember that bridge clearly, the kind of memory that lingers because it pressed against all my senses at once, leaving a mark that refuses to fade. We were driving late at night through a stretch of Appalachia I'd never traveled before. The forest dense on either side, shadows stretching like fingers across the road. The air was cool, thick with the scent of damp leaves and earth, and the only sounds were the tires crunching over gravel and the occasional distant call of an owl. My friends were talking quietly, trying to keep the mood light, but I could feel unease building in the pit of my stomach, the subtle tension that grows when something feels slightly off and you can't explain why. That's when the bridge appeared, old, wooden, and narrow, spanning a river that disappeared into the shadows below. As we drove onto the bridge, the boards groaned under the car's weight, each plank protesting in low wooden moans that echoed faintly down the length of the river. I felt the vibrations under my feet, through the pedals, and I could sense the bridge's age, the decay beneath the surface. But there was something else there too, something that didn't belong to mere wood and nails. I leaned forward slightly, trying to peer over the side, and that's when I noticed the river itself. It moved strangely, not just flowing, but murmuring in a rhythm, almost like words. I couldn't make out what it was saying, no language I knew, but the cadence was deliberate, patterned, as though the water was speaking directly to us, or at least aware of our presence. My friends fell silent, the kind of silence that isn't comfortable but heavy, shared, thick with unease. Every instinct screamed at me to move quickly across the bridge, yet I couldn't look away from the water. Shadows flickered beneath the planks, stretching upward, thin and elongated, reaching toward the car as though trying to touch or grasp at us. I could feel them moving in the corner of my vision, always there, never fully seen, and there was a sense that the eyes beneath the surface were watching, patient and deliberate. The weight of attention pressed down on me in a way that made my chest tighten. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary. The murmuring grew louder as we crossed the midpoint, a low, rhythmic cadence that pulsed in tandem with my heartbeat. My ears strained to catch patterns, but it wasn't a language I could comprehend. It felt older, something instinctual, something primal. The water didn't just flow, it listened, it judged, and it waited. I could feel it, a subtle pressure beneath the bridge, as if the river itself was aware of our trespass. I caught my friend's eyes briefly, wide and pale, mirrors of my own fear. None of us spoke, though every nerve in our bodies screamed in warning. I had the sense that saying anything might break some fragile veil, drawing attention we didn't want. I tried to accelerate, to get off the bridge faster, but each plank seemed to stretch beneath us, the groaning growing into a low hum that harmonized with the murmuring water. The shadows twisted with the movement of the car, lengthening, bending impossibly. For a moment I felt suspended, caught between the old wooden boards above and the river's dark awareness below. There was an uncanny patience in the way the shadows shifted, a deliberate observation, like the forest and the river had been waiting for travelers like us for years. Finally, we reached the far side, the bridge's planks giving one last low groan beneath us before the forest swallowed the road again. The murmuring stopped abruptly, leaving only the echo in my mind, a sound that lingered long after we'd driven away. My friends exhaled collectively, the tension breaking with a shiver, but the memory of it didn't ease. Even now, whenever I hear running water in the mountains, I feel that same pressure. The weight of unseen eyes, the cadence of the murmuring that seems to exist just at the edge of understanding. Driving away, I couldn't shake the sensation that we had been observed, noted, maybe even judged. The river, the shadows, the old wood, they hadn't just been physical things beneath us. They had been alive in some older sense, aware, patient, deliberate. I can still picture the way the boards bent under the tires, the way the shadows stretched upward, the rhythm of the murmuring threading through the forest air. That night, something ancient brushed against our modern world, and we had passed through it unaware, but not untouched. Even years later, the image of that hollow bridge returns unbidden. On hikes, I pause when I hear water moving beneath stones, the murmur faint but insistent, and I feel the same pressure, the same eyes on me. It's subtle now, more memory than reality, but I know the sensation is real. The river beneath that bridge wasn't ordinary, and the shadows weren't simply tricks of light. Some parts of the forest, some stretches of water, exist in a state that observes, remembers, waits. I have never returned to that bridge, and I don't intend to. But every time I drive past a river at night, every time I hear the rush of water in the mountains, I feel that same pull of attention. The hollow bridge taught me that some places are patient, that some rivers speak in rhythms older than humans, and that shadows can observe as keenly as eyes. It left a mark in my memory, a silent warning that still echoes, reminding me that even in the quiet of Appalachia, some things are watching, waiting, murmuring in ways that cannot be ignored. The lesson I carry is simple but heavy. Curiosity in those mountains has its limits. Not everything that exists in the dark is benign, and not every old bridge is just wood and nails. The river, the shadows, the groaning boards, they were aware, deliberate, and patient, and their attention lingers with me still. I can't hear a stream without remembering that night, the hollow bridge, the murmuring, and I suspect I never will. I remember Devil's Curve better than I'd like, the kind of memory that presses against your chest long after the road has faded behind you. It was late, the kind of night when the mountains feel like they close in on themselves, the sky low and thick, and the wind moving only in sudden, shallow gusts. We'd been driving for hours, headlights cutting faint slices through the dark, the road twisting sharply as it wound around the ridge. I'd heard the name from locals, a warning more than a joke, but I never imagined just how true it would feel until that night. As we approached the bend, a low fog rose from the valley below, curling upward like smoke, thicker and heavier than anything natural, swallowing the road and the trees beyond. The lights from the car barely penetrated more than a few feet, and the familiar landscape I had been following vanished entirely. As we slowed, trying to see the road ahead, I realized the fog wasn't static. Shapes moved within it, barely distinguishable from the swirling mist, circling the car as if it were a predator or prey caught in the center. I squinted, trying to make sense of the movement, but the forms shifted unnaturally, fading whenever I focused directly on them. Every mirror reflected motion that didn't match reality, shadows that weren't there when I turned my head, corners of the car interior stretching or compressing in ways that made my stomach twist. My friends were tense, silent, gripping the edges of the seats, and the air inside the car felt thick, almost viscous, pressing in around us with a suffocating weight. Each moment stretched endlessly. I felt the road itself reacting, subtly, almost imperceptibly. When I adjusted the wheel, I could swear the car nudged in directions I hadn't intended, a gentle but persistent push toward the outside edge of the curve where the cliff dropped into darkness below. I fought the steering instinctively, but the sensation persisted, the car seemingly guided by an unseen hand or force. Every instinct screamed to leave, to push through, but the fog and the shapes within it held me in place, patient and deliberate. The wind whispered at the edges of the fog, carrying faint sounds that weren't quite words, but had cadence, rhythm, and a presence that felt aware of us. The shapes in the fog became more defined, but still impossible. They were tall, long-limbed, shadows moving in ways a body should not, bending around the car and slipping back into mist when we tried to focus. Occasionally, I thought I caught glimpses of eyes, just faint glints that reflected our headlights for a heartbeat before vanishing. The tension was electric, a low, vibrating pressure that made my teeth clench and my pulse hammer in my ears. Every nerve in me screamed to look away, to accelerate blindly, but part of me was rooted there, watching, counting, aware that leaving without understanding might make the night worse. My friends whispered nervously, trying to rationalize it as fog tricks, illusions, or exhaustion. I wanted to believe them, but the sensation that the road itself was alive, guiding us toward the edge, was undeniable. Even when we corrected the wheel, when we tried to take control, the subtle push returned. The way the tires skidded slightly, against invisible resistance, the way the air seemed to shift, nudging us closer to the cliffside. I felt trapped in a space that existed only for observation. Our car and ourselves caught in a loop of attention we didn't ask for and could not fully escape. Minutes or maybe an hour passed, though time in that fog felt unreal, stretched and distorted. Every blink of the headlights revealed new forms, new shadows, always moving, always circling, always patient. The fog was not a passive veil. It was active, a medium for observation, for manipulation, a presence that had endured longer than any human mind could fathom. My hands ached from gripping the wheel, my chest tight with fear, and the car's engine felt loud and intrusive against the low hum of the fog pressing in. Eventually, we broke free. The fog thinned as the road straightened, the familiar trees and rocks returning to their natural forms. The push from the curve stopped. The car felt light again, unbound. Yet the memory remained, heavy, like the fog itself had left residue in my mind, a lingering awareness of the attention we had drawn. I glanced back at the curve, now seemingly normal, ordinary, as though nothing had happened at all, but I could still feel the weight of unseen eyes, the sensation of a road alive with intent, guiding us, testing us, observing us. Since that night, I avoid Devil's Curve whenever possible. Even in daylight, I can feel its presence in the mountain. Air, subtle, patient, pressing at the edge of my consciousness. Shadows in foggy bends feel closer. The wind carries whispers that may or may not be imagination. And I know that particular curve waits, always, for the next traveler to draw too close. That road taught me something simple and terrifying. Some corners of the mountains are patient, alive in ways we cannot measure, and their attention does not fade simply because the sun rises. The fog at Devil's Curve wasn't just weather, it was awareness. The shapes, the nudges, the unnatural reflections in the mirrors. All of it was deliberate, the mountain itself observing intruders, weighing them, perhaps remembering them. I can feel the echo of that night whenever I drive in mist or watch fog roll across the valleys. The sensation lingers, low and suffocating, a reminder that the mountains are patient, the roads are aware, and some curves exist only to test those who pass. Even now, the memory tightens my chest if I think too long, and I know that if I return to that bend, even briefly, the same feeling will return. The fog curling around the tires, shapes circling, mirrors reflecting impossibilities, and the road pushing gently, insistently, toward the edge. The fear from that night did not vanish with the fog. It stays, embedded, a quiet warning against curiosity and familiarity. Devil's Curve remembers, and it waits. rest area with a clarity that makes my skin crawl, the kind of memory that lingers because it pressed against every sense at once. We were driving late through the mountains, headlights cutting faint lines across the pavement, the radio long dead, and the air thick with the chill of night. I suggested stopping. My friends agreed, thinking a quick break would be harmless. From the outside, the place looked ordinary. Bright fluorescent lights flickering intermittently, concrete picnic tables under shelters, a small building for restrooms and vending machines. But as soon as we stepped out of the car, the air shifted. The silence was heavy, deafening, pressing against our ears so that even the smallest sound seemed amplified and wrong. The wind didn't move, yet trash rustled in small piles, moving just enough to make us glance around. Shadows along the walls leaned in impossible angles, stretching wider or thinner depending on where I looked. I could feel the hairs on my neck rising, a primal warning that something unseen was watching. One of my friends joked nervously about rats or stray animals, but the rational explanations didn't hold. The movement was deliberate, almost knowing. It was subtle, a disturbance that felt alive, sentient, aware of our presence. I decided to check the restroom. The door creaked as I entered, the dim interior illuminated by a flickering overhead light. Tiles were cracked, sinks dusty, the air smelled faintly of mold and something metallic, almost like blood. As I approached a stall, I heard it. My name whispered, soft and deliberate, carried on a breath that shouldn't have existed. I froze, listening, but when I stepped closer, the restroom was empty, the tiles cold beneath my fingers. No one was there. Nothing was there. And yet the whisper had weight, as though something unseen had leaned across the threshold of sound just to reach me. Exiting, I found the parking lot empty, or so it seemed. Cars were parked in neat rows, untouched, no movement, yet the sensation of eyes on us pressed from the shadows, from the corners of the lot, from the darkness beyond the lights. Every step toward the car felt like an intrusion, each movement noticed, recorded. I could feel it following, patient, deliberate, an awareness that didn't hurry but didn't sleep. The hairs on my neck remained standing, prickling with the certainty that our presence was unwelcome, that leaving the lot would not erase the attention. We climbed into the car, doors clicking shut, and I glanced back once. The rest area seemed normal again, the fluorescent lights flickering like nothing had happened, but the feeling lingered, low and insistent. As we pulled away, the road swallowed us quickly, and yet I could feel it behind us, the silence, the eyes, the faint whisper still echoing in my mind. It wasn't just a place. It was a presence, patient and deliberate, and it remained with us as we drove, embedding itself into the memory of the mountains, of the roads, of every empty lot we would pass later, even now, years later. I can feel it in certain places, deserted rest areas, quiet parking lots, stretches of road in the Appalachians that appear ordinary but carry a weight in the air, a subtle press against the ears, a whisper at the edge of hearing, shadows that move just slightly wrong. The last rest stop taught me something simple and terrifying. Some places are patient. Some stops exist not to rest travelers, but to mark them, to remind them that the mountains remember and that silence has weight. I try not to think of it often, but every time I step into a darkened parking lot at night, my mind flashes back. The whisper, the leaning shadows, the rustling trash, the eyes that weren't human, weren't alive in the conventional sense, but were watching nonetheless. Some stops are final, some stops are warnings. And that night we passed one,